Welcome back into the All Things Mizzou podcast presented by Missouri Tigers on OnSI. Here to talk holiday season for Missouri football and men's basketball. A lot going on with Missouri football offseason. We've talked about all that. Today we're going to look ahead to the Gator Bowl, and then we're going to talk about this Missouri basketball team who has ruined Christmas for the Missouri fan base. Joey Van Zummeren here along with Michael Stamps to talk about all of that going on. We're going to start off by talking about Missouri men's basketball. Michael, I know from our text conversations how you feel about this team. Regurgitate that for our viewers, please.
Yeah, in the nicest way possible, I think this is just simply one of the worst possible outcomes you could have ever imagined for this team. And, since that 2023 season where they didn't win an SEC game, it feels like, last year and this year, that's kind of a lingering, sense of fear that could happen again. And they squashed that pretty quick last year. And, it wasn't a perfect team, but, they squashed it pretty quick, despite some up and down in the non-conference. And, it's kind of the same this year, but the feeling and the sentiment around this team, with us, with the reporters, especially with the fans too, is just completely different. Losing 3 games on paper and being 10-3 heading into the SEC on paper is not the end of the world. How they have looked losing those 3 basketball games, I mean, again, I don't think it could be much worse. We're recording this on Tuesday, so the Illinois game was the night before. That was embarrassing, if we're being completely honest with each other. They lost in every single statistical category possible, so there's that. But it felt like an effort thing at a certain point, and like they were just being completely out hustled, whether it was rebounding on defense. And then I know Illinois is bigger, and also worth mentioning that Illinois is better. I don't think I expected Missouri to win that game the same way I didn't expect Missouri to beat Kansas. But there wasn't much fight. There wasn't much resilience in those games. So it's disappointing. I mean, I look back at that 23 season, and yeah, they lost a lot of basketball games, but it always felt, even when that team was in its darkest moments, towards the end of SEC play, where they were either getting blown out or there were so many close games. They never stopped fighting. And I know there's still a lot of season left this year, and we still have the whole SEC schedule, but I feel like I haven't seen that. I don't have the confidence that even if they're going to lose a lot of games, that they're going to, respond and battle back. And I know they're injured. Dennis Gates made sure that we knew they were injured last night. And, to an extent, I agree with him. I think you can't look at that team and say it's completely healthy. And what he said about other, guys who are playing different roles, or roles that they weren't expected to play in. And some of these injuries have kind of taken away from the entire piece of the puzzle, or, the entire roster construction. And I think to an extent, I agree with that. Not having Jaden Stone really hurts this team's perimeter shooting. And, Javon Porter is at least a willing 3-point shooter, which makes a difference. And Trent Pierce obviously can add to that as well. So, those things do make a difference, but regardless, you can't be pleased with on the court product. I think there's a lot of just seems like fundamental issues on both sides of the ball. A lot of guys who aren't willing to shoot on offense. I think you could run down the list of guys who are, trying to drive and take contested shots and create contact when it's not there at the rim, instead of shooting a open or semi-contested 3-point shot. I could probably on 2 hands name some guys who opt for that instead of shooting the 3. I think there was a lack of physicality on defense against Illinois that just was frustrating to watch. And again, I know Illinois is huge. I mean, they're really big. It's hard to counter 2 7-footers, and Merkovich, who is 6'9", 250. Wagler couldn't miss, but he's a 6'6" guard. Stojakovic is a 6'7", 200-pound guard. I mean, Boswell is 220 pounds, so they're big. But you can match that by playing hard, and My big takeaway was that I don't know if they really played as hard as they could, and they looked fine those first 8 minutes, and it just, whatever magic they had in that time period just kind of fizzled out. So it kind of feels like this Illinois loss was an embodiment of what the season's been so far, and I think there's going to have to be a lot to correct before, I think it's January 3rd when the reigning national champions come to town. So not getting much easier.
Right. What you said as far as the injuries and what Dennis had harped on as the injuries are putting some guys out of position, putting their lineups out of where they'd like to be is true. And I also think that the bigger issue too, though, is that they were banking on guys being able to take a step up, whether that was returners being able to take a step up in their development. Anthony Robinson being at the forefront of that, Mark Mitchell included in that too. They were also banking on transfers being able to make a step up. For some players, a jump up in competition, like Javon Porter. For some players, a jump up in the role. And Sebastian Mack, you look at as a guy in that situation, Luke Northweather as well too, I would say. And it doesn't seem like any of those things they were banking on are really happening. Like you said, with the injuries, I can have some sympathy there to an extent, but I don't see, even when those, especially Jaden Stone being the key guy there, that's clearly not all of their problems. And so obviously going into that Illinois game last night, the discussion was like, all right, like they need this for, if they want to make the tournament, they are going to need something to point to in their non-conference schedule. Now, I don't think anybody is too worried about the tournament. And look, like you said, they're not halfway through their schedule yet. SEC plays where you find out what a team really is, especially when Missouri has spent October, November, and December playing a lot of low major teams. We're going to find out more so what they're made of in SEC play, obviously, but it's going to require a really big turnaround. It's going to require getting those guys healthy. As far as Jaden Stone, it does look like he's going to be healthy. I mean, at least according to his original timeline, and he looks like he's making progress on that path to be able to return for SEC play, which is going to be big. But it's going to require an impressive turnaround, and they're going to have to get right about, well, at or better of an SEC record than they did last year. I say at because SEC isn't the formidable historic beast it was last year, it seems. But it's going to have to be an impressive conference, to say the least. Michael, flip what I was just talking about there. Is there any reason you believe this team will get better once SEC play starts and they have their roster back to health?
Yeah, I think there are 4 guys on this team who should bring some light to how bad this Missouri roster has looked at moments. Mark Mitchell is still averaging 17, 18 points a game. Last night was uncharacteristically bad for him. He just looked shook. He wasn't aggressive on offense and held his own ish on defense, but didn't really matter because he wasn't even trying to score. That's where him not being able to shoot the 3 at all just makes him kind of a black hole, because he's such an elite and athletic downhill driver and really has improved his finishing around the rim, I think, noticeably. I didn't think that at first after watching the first few games of the season, but I mean, I think the numbers say that that's the case, and he's been efficient-ish this year. So, I mean, Mark Mitchell is on track to be an all-SEC player. So there's that. I think Jacob Cruz, when he is not tentative, is a great player. He is arguably the most improved player on this team. The numbers also agree with that. He's averaging 13.9 points per game. He was around 14 before that. So before last night. So he's been, very good. Still one of the best 3-point shooters in the entire country. He just has to be a little bit more aggressive again. And maybe Illinois is a bad example of that because they have such an unprecedented amount of height and length. And again, they're just so big. So they can contest the perimeter so well, but also don't have to do much to shut things down in the paint. I don't know how many shots they blocked. I had that pulled up here. They blocked 8 shots, so that is pretty impressive. And I think a few of them came in like a 5-minute span in the first half. So there's that. I think Jaden Stone, when he comes back, he's a great shooter, kind of electric off the bench, or if he's starting. Also incredibly athletic, which I think is going to make a difference from one of the guard spots. And then Anthony Robinson, too. I mean, I know he is not having the season that any of us thought he would have. And, it's fine. He just hasn't taken the jump. It kind of feels like he's still in that same spot as he was last year, where he's showing us flashes of what he could be if he becomes a more complete player. And I think those flashes are still enough to be one of the best players on this team. He's still been great on defense. Kind of seems like he's getting away a little bit from his super, kind of foul-y ways that we kind of know him to do. I feel like I've seen him be a little bit more composed over the last couple of games in terms of emotional like regulation and that sort of thing. He's doesn't look super upset, and he's shown he can hit the 3. He made 2 against Illinois and has made more against other teams. And he is still a good, tough downhill driver. I think there's still something there. I'm not completely out on Anthony Robinson either. So I think those 4 have to be at the top of their game. They have to be aggressive. Mizzou is not going to win if Mark Mitchell is not aggressive. I think that's one of my other big takeaways, from last night. And I wrote about it last night that no one stepped up. And that has to be Mark Mitchell. It just has to be. Like, he's allowed to force shots. He's earned the right to attempt more than 6 shots a game, or 6 shots. That's just not enough. And one of those was a bad 3. Like, go drive. And he is smart enough to play off 2 feet and get guys to jump. He's athletic. He has a long wingspan, so he can finish around people. Like, he has to be more aggressive. And again, I know that's part of what Illinois was doing, and they had so much hype down low. It was kind of hard to counteract. But and I know he maybe got a little bit banged up at the end of that one too. Looked like he might have been holding his back or something. But I think all the time before that, he just looked like kind of a shell of himself. That can't happen. Missouri is not going to win any games if that's the case. And same thing with Jacob Cruz and Ant Robinson. Ant Robinson had the first 9 points in the first 5 minutes of the game last night, and then just looked like a shell of himself for the rest of the game. He was hunting shots. He was trying to get downhill. He got fouled. That went away. I think that's the best version of Anthony Robinson. So again, you look back at the injuries, and you can argue that it's certainly taking a toll on the team, and maybe it doesn't hurt or it doesn't help with fatigue and guys playing more minutes and different roles and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I think there are a lot of players not, especially against Illinois. I think Illinois kind of highlighted that there are guys who need to be doing more and could be doing more, and then if they're doing more, maybe raises the ceiling of this team a little bit.
Right. As far as Mark Mitchell, Brad Underwood talked about really focusing in on Mitchell after he had a good game against Illinois last year. Talked about putting a lot of attention on double teaming him, and then also really preventing him from giving in transition. Both of those were clear, and obviously it's going to be a difficult challenge of driving much attention away from that double team when the rest of the offense is operating like they were. So key part of Illinois' game plan. So yeah, I agree with what you said. Especially Jacob Cruz, like you said, what I was saying as far as expecting guys to take those jumps, Jacob Cruz is the one guy you can point to so far that has done that. So we'll see how this team progresses. It does definitely bring some interesting questions as to what next year means. I'm not going to rule anything of how this season ends. It's still early, like we said. Still things can happen. But at least with the trajectory it's on and what this team has showed us through non-conference play, look, we knew going into this season basically doesn't matter for kind of what next year, or as far as the state of the program per se. But it does put a lot of pressure on next season, and what Dennis Gates is able to get out of that freshman class immediately, especially when you look at the 2024 class composite ranking of the 5th best in the country. And we're looking at retaining 3 of those 5 guys on their sophomore season. Trent and Honor have both dealt with injuries in both those seasons. But Honor Boateng also not having the best showing last night, to say the least. Still kind of waiting on that development. You point to Trent Pierce, another guy kind of in that group. I mean, he's dealing with injuries, of course, now too, and we'll see what he is once he returns. But just kind of diminishing returns as far as what these guys were expected to do. All right, let's move on to talk about Mizzou football. We'll start off with the hire of Chip Lindsey as the offensive coordinator. The more time I've had to kind of think about this hire, it's like, that's kind of interesting. I think Chip is an interesting candidate, one that he's coming from Michigan, and kind of the whole mess there. The fact that he was only at Michigan for one season, the fact that the only job he's had for over 2 years is Troy's head coach, where he had a losing record there. I wouldn't look too much into the fact that he's had short stints. I mean, it doesn't take too long. I mean, you look at his recent resume, was with Michigan for 1 year. No surprise there that he didn't stick with that job after everything that's happened there in the past few weeks. At UNC, he joined Fran Brown's staff shortly before that. Fran Brown's stint ends at UNC. And really early on in his career, going from offensive assistant at Auburn to an offense coordinator at Southern Miss, then to OC at Arizona State, then OC at Auburn. Those are all clear jumps up. It's not like they're lateral moves where he's really just climbing the chain pretty quickly there, quite honestly. But it is certainly an interesting part of what he brings in, kind of projecting that, because it's hard to get a real look at what his offensive identity is really going to be. Kind of have to take certain bits and pieces of where he's been. And the other part of that is that he does share some similarities with Eli Drinkwitz as far as the outside zone running game. Spent a lot of time with Gus Malzahn developing that. But then he's also been in an offense like Todd Monken's, which is pretty different. So interesting resume, interesting project what he's going to do there. Recruiting is also tough to say, just because of, you look at, one of the top things you look at for Lindsey's resume is the quarterbacks he's worked with. It's like, well, he didn't, obviously you got to give him credit for the work he did with Drake May, with Nick Mullins, the two guys that stick out the most, but also didn't recruit those guys, didn't work with those guys throughout their entire career. So tough to say there. Been a lot of praise that you can look back on from both Drake May and Nick Mullins as far as Lindsey's coaching approach. And I do think it is important for, not surprising if quarterback development and production was a focus for Eli Drinkwitz in this hire. A very important hire for Eli Drinkwitz to get right. Michael, what are your main thoughts on this?
Yeah, with the recruiting stuff, it's interesting as well. I don't know how involved he was in getting Bryce Underwood to Michigan. That seems like it was a pretty.
I believe Underwood was committed before Lindsey was even there.
Yeah. So regardless, I think with Underwood, regardless, it's not worth looking too much into that. I mean, throwing a true freshman quarterback, starting in the Big Ten, he had his moments, and I think he, all things considered, played okay. So there's that. I really don't have much to add outside of what you said, Joey. I mean, it's interesting that he has as many different stops as he does around the country, and I do agree that they do all kind of appear to be jumps up. I think the variety of experience is, in my mind, it's got to be a benefit, just having so much, having so many, so much knowledge and like coaches under his belt and players under his belt. It obviously looks a little odd that he hasn't been able to stay at one place for super long, but again, like you said, he has the Gus Malzahn connection. He clearly knows how to operate the outside zone. So I don't, he definitely wasn't a guy that I think any of us initially thought of. But I don't immediately see any issues with the hire. So I don't really have much to say outside of that. I mean, the fact that he hasn't been in one place for super long, I kind of think we just have to wait and see the product he puts on the field next season, and then we'll be able to evaluate it, because it's been a little bit sporadic moving around different schools. But outside of that, I don't really have much else to add.
Yeah, going to be interested to hear from Eli Drinkwitz on this. Obviously, the main thing with this hire that needs to improve from the offense is the passing game as a whole, and that's another aspect which makes this interesting. Is just that it's not like Chip Lindsey, at least with Michigan, was running a super innovative passing offense, and a lot of that was, like you mentioned with Underwood, kind of adapting to that. There was a lot of screens, a lot of quick passes in the Michigan offense this past season. Um, so the interested to see kind of how that meshes. Also, hard to say what this offense is going to look like until we know what the quarterback situation is going to be. Um, and we've talked about that in our last episode. Just how much faith is Missouri going to have in Matt Zollers to hand him the keys in his sophomore season, or are they going to look to make a big swing? At the very least, I mean, the work he did with Underwood, it's not like Bryce Underwood was a extremely productive quarterback in his first season. Obviously, still showing that potential, though. Reason why he was the number one rated prospect in the 2025 class. But at the very least, can see that he's going to be willing to work with a younger quarterback and kind of develop an offense around him. Also hard to, get a picture of what he was doing at Michigan because it seems like Sherrone Moore, who was Michigan's offense coordinator before he was promoted to replace Jim Harbaugh, still obviously having a voice on that Michigan offense. So tough to say there. I think there has been some overreactions to it. Obviously, I mean, you look at some of the units that he's had, and they haven't been great. There have been some, obviously, working with Drake May in 2023. That UNC offense was pretty dang good. But again, interested to hear from Eli Drinkwitz some more on why I thought Lindsey was the right fit for this. Moving on to the Gator Bowl here, just wanted to talk quickly about this game as far as what would it mean for the team, and then also just some guys that are going to get some more playing time in this. I think the most important thing in this game, besides winning it, because the more I think about it, I do think this game would mean, I think it would mean a lot more than the Music City Bowl did last year for Missouri over Iowa. Not quite as much as the Cotton Bowl, but I do think this game would mean something, and having this win would mean something. But as far as getting some real benefit out of this, as far as evaluation, I think the most important thing is being able to get a good look at Matt Zollers in this game. I don't think anything he does is necessarily going to change Missouri's decision as far as what they want to do at quarterback. I don't think anything he did this year really should change the belief they have in what Matt Zollers could be. But to have a chance to get to show more of that, especially when he's going to have a month to study this Virginia defense and work on that game plan in about 2 weeks, knowing he's going to be the starter for it, I think is a really good opportunity. And I was thinking before Bo Papila transferred that really made more sense for Matt to start this game anyways. Although Eli Drinkwitz has talked a lot about, they're not going to use this game as tryouts. They want to win this game. So the other thing too, being the guys at positions where guys have transferred are going to be hurt. So at tight end, Brett Norfleet's going to miss the game. At wide receiver, Marquise Johnson, Joshua Manning, James Madison have all transferred. So you're going to have a depleted wide receiver depth chart. And then Josiah Trotter is also going to miss this game. So some guys at all those positions that are going to get more playing time. Michael, as far as roster evaluation, what do you think the benefit of this game is for Missouri?
Yeah, I mean, one, I feel like Virginia, all things considered, I think I said this when we maybe talked about it initially, but Virginia's a good team. Not that Iowa last year was a bad team, but I think if we're comparing opponents, I mean, this Virginia team has some validity to it. I know, you can make the argument about the ACC being what it was this year, and the fact that they lost to Duke in the ACC title with a chance to go to the college football playoff maybe isn't the greatest thing on the planet, but still only a 3-loss team with a lot of really talented players and really interesting turnaround from Tony Elliott. So I think that in itself makes it this game a little bit more important. Just it is a pretty solid opponent that would, probably be their best win of the season. I know things get kind of weird with the bowl games because, guys start to transfer and opt out and there's injuries and all that stuff. So even, if either team is not full force, I think you can make the argument that this would still be the best win of the season for for Missouri. But I think what you kind of said is the most important. Just getting to see Matt Zollers with a good chunk of time to prepare. That's going to be the most time he's really had to prepare for a matchup. He's going to truly get to prepare like he was the starter, like he is a starter, and really go through all of that like in a more normal, comfortable process. So I think that's going to be a difference maker. Outside of that, though, I mean, last year there were guys who were opted out and were hurt. It happens every year, it seems like. So, or transferred. So with the receiver room, I mean, it is what it is. There's guys who can play. You might get to see a little bit of Sean Terry or maybe Fulks or something like that. Obviously, Kevin Coleman and Olubade are going to be the primary guys. I don't know who that sole third one's going to be, but you'd imagine it's Daniel Blood or Xavier Lloyd, who we haven't seen much of either of those guys this year. But I mean, better late than never, I guess. Might be fun to get some eyes on those two. Blood's a guy who's been around for a while and hasn't always been the most productive. You'd like to think he's maybe earned a chance, but Lloyd's an experienced guy too. So we'll see there. I mean, tight end spot too. Jordan and Jude played all season long. Jude saw a bit of an uptick compared to last season. So, I mean, not really anything too shocking there. It feels like we were in the situation last year where we thought Jude James was going to play a lot in the Music City Bowl, and if I am correct, he didn't. So maybe we'll actually, maybe we'll actually get to see him, get some more snaps. I think he's earned it, so that'll be one worth monitoring as well. But it'll be I doubt. I mean, I guess I don't want to say I doubt we'll see more people leave between now and then. It'd be pretty surprising if people leave in the next 3 days. But I've been surprised before, and I'll be surprised again. So I guess that's something to keep an eye on. But I mean, outside of that, it's still a pretty full force team at this point. With the NFL draft guys, I would be under the assumption that they're going to play. I know we've been under that assumption, but feels like we would have heard something by now. From the NFL or from them if they were going to sit out. So feels like we'll get to see, all those dudes too, which does make a difference. I mean, when if Damon's not playing, if Caden's not playing or any of the other guys, I mean, those are experienced players, where maybe the depth isn't as great. I mean, if there's no Caden Green, that automatically, becomes an issue. So, it'll be good to presumably have those guys as well. But yeah, I mean, I think, all things considered, 3 9-win seasons in a row is something to hang your hat on. It's improvement from, what was here before. So at the end of the day, I don't think you can, really be disappointed about that if that's the case.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. As far as the guys playing more at wide receiver, it's interesting. I forgot about Xavier Lloyd, and that's probably honestly going to be the main guy there as far as the second boundary guy. I wouldn't be surprised out of Sean Terry and Demarion Folks. I lean more toward Folks as far as someone who would get opportunities just because of the speed you lose with Marquise Johnson. Feel like Folks has the most to be able to replace that if you want a deep threat, although it's not like that was a big part of the offense when Marquise was there this season. Also feel like you'll probably see a good amount of Logan Muckey, especially losing that run blocking with Joshua Manning. Muckey can do that, and really in that Arkansas game, Logan Muckey was pretty much doing that in the second half of that game. Agree with what you said on Jude James. Maybe we see Gavin Hoffman take his first snaps of the season there. But yeah, I agree with you. For the most part, feel good about where this team is at heading into this game. And like you said, chance to get 30 wins in the past 3 seasons and the first ranked win since playing Boston College early in 2024 would mean something, a good way to end off the season for what has been a somewhat underwhelming year for this football team. Eli Drinkwitz did say that there's few guys he expects to enter the portal shortly after the bowl game. It's going to be about 5 days between the bowl game and then the transfer portal opening. And they're allowing them to practice, stay with the team before they officially announce those plans, which I think is just from my personal viewpoint, is a good move. Tough situation for those guys. But we'll have the coverage over here at Missouri Tigers on SI. Looking forward to that bowl game. Any final thoughts, Michael, on this bowl game or the basketball team before we round it out?
It's gonna be nice to have 10 or 11 days to not have to watch this basketball team. I think it's probably gonna be nice for them. Nice for them to have a little bit of a break too. I mean, in all seriousness, I with how beat up they, with their injuries and how beat up they've been, the recovery period is actually probably going to be nice. And it feels like we've seen a couple guys go down at moments in some sort of pain and come back in, maybe because it wasn't that serious, or maybe because there's just not enough depth right now for them to not be in the game. So this will be some good time for them to heal, but there's got to be a lot of reflection there. And then on the football side of things, I mean, should be a fun game. And then right after that is arguably the busiest time of the year, which I think I'm at the point where I'm ready for. Again, it's confusing to me that you can announce your intention to transfer, especially after they went out of their way to change the transfer portal window. So I guess it technically has already started, but the even more crazy part of that, we'll get here on January 2nd. And, I would be lying if I said I wasn't slightly excited to see some of the chaos that ensues, because as of right now, a lot of good guys in the portal in general, not even for Mizzou's sake, a lot of good guys in the portal in general. So it should be really interesting.
With that, I will announce my intention to wrap up this episode. So appreciate y'all tuning in. Hope you tune into the rest of our coverage over at Missouri Tigers on SI.